Failure is blunderous. My objective is not to give an essay on the spiritual aims of both sides, but to enlighten about them. The aims and tasks of the anti-Kondo community and Kondo cult were universal and complex enough that it can only be covered through an entire book, from a universal perspective on both individual and collective experiences. Something to consider is that all societal changes are presented by a few individuals, but only applicable by thousands. Each time, the aim has been a product of one or more universal components, constructed into a general will, and eventually a new idea. Despite being largely indifferent to the Kondo cult, many are discontent with Roadblock's moderation processes, proving the basic desire for order is as powerful as the impulse for autonomy. This inclination towards order expresses itself in various ways, through militaristic groups, Roadblock's vigilantism, and much more. Something to consider is that all societal changes are presented by a few individuals, but only applicable by thousands. Each time, the aim has been a product of one or more universal components, constructed into a general will, and eventually a new idea. Despite being largely indifferent to the Kondo cult, many are discontent with Roadblock's moderation processes, proving the basic desire for order is as powerful as the impulse for autonomy. This inclination towards order expresses itself in various ways, through militaristic groups, Roadblock's vigilantism, and much more. As witnesses to this inner dissatisfaction, we know to be cautious of the manipulative con leaders, who draw more into their industry and rob them of any sense of conviction. The con leader corrupted the weak, but also sought to sabotage the strong. The anti-Kondo community is not meant to facilitate contentment or satisfaction, but to protect those who are regretful, the discontent, those with unhappy roots in the platform of Roadblocks. As you face inevitable inactivity approaches, a repeating pattern presents itself, anti-Kondo users divided in two. 1. Reliant on personalized and dynamic interests. The ones who attempt to fight for their ideas and objectives with shallow and fragile spiritual tools, always failing in the face of modern secularization and the Kondo cult's discarded morality. Every action taken by these anti-Kondo users leads to humiliation and cowardice. This is evident among LARPA groups, those with divided values and thus divided efforts. The second half, those governed by the general public. They are only organized when it brings them social benefit, and are thus more externally than internally reliant. They may or may not claim or seek independence, but unconsciously reject consistent promotion of their own interests or values. It is the more numerous that comprise the elements necessary for the resurrection of intellectual strength, while the personalized possess the outward power. However, the prerequisites for collective growth were not numbers alone. The Roadblocks community had more than enough numbers. They were unable to secure progress because the will of preservation was attached to the self rather than the culture. In both the internally or externally reliant, the desire to maintain and promote strength was lacking. Those determined to use it were few and far. Hence, even the anti-Kondo users remained defenseless, not because numbers and awareness were lacking, but because the will was attached to the unstable foundation of interest. When people had the oversight to point at the lack of contributors as the cause of the Kondo cult's preservation, we must answer that the opposite is true. Thanks to the public's complacency and fickleness, the Kondo cult successfully drove Roadblock's community closer towards the values of impulse instead of strength, taking full advantage of Roadblock's player base being children and adolescents. Now they attempt to glorify the strength of impulse over willpower. This, like everything the con leader does, is either deceitful or exaggerated. Consequently, the question of regaining power against condos is not how should we grow our group, but how shall we manufacture the spirit within a growing group. Courage with 1 arrow misses less than cowardice with 10. Profit is rewarding. A group's ability to form alliances is determined much less than activity than the visible presence of group spirit, which in itself is already rarer in groups than activity. The best alliances are not conducted by numbers, but by consistency in activity. If we understand that the power of the anti-Kondo community represents intellectual strength, it is clear that consistency retains as essential a role as willpower. It is clear that this cannot be reliably accomplished by reinforcing current motivations, but restructuring and distributing them among the public, of course for everyone's benefit. Hence, I gradually integrated discussions of intellectual strength and practicality into each conversation, both online or in the physical world. Constructing intellectual strength as a combination of universal values proved beneficial, as no logical opposition would object to the promotion of ambitious learning, dedication, self-discipline, adaptability, in maintaining a healthy culture. Even the LARPers or con leaders will hold little power in this culture, reverting to cowardice when they demonstrate fickleness and narrow-mindedness in the face of resistance. In their natural primitiveness, the con member is more inclined to explicit activity than money, evident in the amount of Robux they spend on Kondo games. Hence why the con leader primarily becomes such for financial profit, and is willing to exterminate others' humanity in its pursuit. Above all, thanks to the innate appeal of intellectual weakness, they will extend the boundaries of their reach throughout the digital and occasionally physical worlds. In doing so, they falsely portray intellectual strength as unnecessary and irrelevant. Even anti-Kondo users are aware of the intellectual weakness governing even the con members' financial distribution, especially regarding a Kondo group they have been interacting in for an extensive period. This exploitation is recognized, yet perceived as profitable due to the con leader, exploiting capitalistic culture from the shadows, declining the value of morality compared to profit. No one allies their group with one who brings no benefit, especially one in a community rife with inconsistency and incompetence. To this we must add that the con members will certainly become hostile against any that claws its way to contribution, with a con member acting in an attempt to convince themselves their weakness is justified. It is inconceivable that the anti-Kondo community could move away from its cycle of flaws without facing the same problems that claim the progression of many anti-Kondo groups. To succumb to these problems can either facilitate harsh lessons, as experienced myself, or the betrayal of intellectual strength. Therefore, any possibility of regaining consistency must consider the innate desire for profit to address both the con leaders and the anti-Kondo users. From a solely theoretical or practical perspective, the idea of dedication to personal and societal growth seems senseless if the public are not prepared to pursue this difficult achievement. Indeed, any struggle cannot be overwhelmed with numbers, but by refining both theory and practicality. It does not help that anyone without intellectual strength would be inclined to squander irreplaceable skill sets or opportunities. Without external motivation, internal adjustments have taken the path of monetizing off of false Kondo games. This not only drains the con members of their Robux, but also forces some con leaders to cut their profits to prevent members from distributing Robux to the false games. Despite this, the majority of con members will still continue to prioritize pleasure over money, buying game passes or Kondo game access that offers a wider range of explicit activity. Thus, just as defensive measures combat natural resistance through ideological profit, many successful anti-Kondo procedures revolved around hindering the Kon leader's monetary profit. When you profit, you know you have adapted to change. Unity is similarity. In my 7 months of U-Face, I clearly realized that to instill any ideology, it must be desired. This is why children were more effective learners. They had much to want and little to hate. There was no social sacrifice too great for a cultural resurrection, and in a healthy environment, there would be no social sacrifice at all in promoting ambitious learning, dedication, self-discipline, and adaptability. What downsides do they have? The wider education of the public can only take place through a social uplift, since only there can individuals be naturally motivated to involve themselves in cultural benefits. To unify the public through this, like with any other means, cannot be achieved with half measures, with a poorly emphasized objective, but through complementary beliefs and actions which demonstrate the promise of intellectual growth. Take care not to let this objective divert into external fields, as this is the mistake made by the political and military LARPers. The Kondo cult's mindset is indeed similar to a disease, but even antidotes require correct handling and faith in usage to become effective. When even the anti-Kondo users, let alone the public, possess shallow knowledge of the Kondo industry and their culture, sentiments remain vulnerable to illogical and ineffective procedures. However, the same emotional reliance can prompt extraordinary conviction. Faith, especially if embraced for a long time, is more difficult to discard than knowledge. Devotion shifts less than respect, and experiences are more impactful than interests. Anyone who intends to unite the public must know that while the room is built to reject irrationality, its key is this very same personalization. Faith can only be combined into unity if others recognize that our struggle benefits ourselves as much as they our peers, just as we need to recognize that Kon members detriment both themselves and their peers. The Kondo cult's elimination must not be portrayed as glorious, but a journey of self-development and spreading benefit. In traveling this path, all ideological contaminants, such as the Kon member, serve not solely as a threat, but as a challenge to one's growth. All great questions represent consequences of definite causes of today's actions. Only one, however, addresses both causes and consequences relevant to the modern age, and that is the preservation of intellectual strength. If people fail to contribute to the collective capacities of a unified humanity, they may as well send primates to our same educational institutions. Those who, like the Kon members, renounce the qualities of intellectual strength begin their descent into impulse. In all humans, the division between nature and nurture is inherent, yet all who progress into greatness are able to master both, blending intellect and creativity to revolutionize their area of specialty. Anyone who wants to rid the Kon members' influence on the world must possess the clearest knowledge not just on the Kondo cult, but on the inherent characteristics of society and humanity. All culture, national, ideological, or otherwise, tells the story of a community's history. In applying this knowledge to U-Face, I hosted a debating event. I compiled or simulated every justification or argument I have seen the Kon members utilize against anti-Kondo users, and at times against members of the public. Half of the participants are instructed to counter those approaches, with the other half demonstrating their knowledge on Kon members by simulating their continuations. After 15 minutes, participants would swap sides. After the event ends, Feedback will be provided to everyone who participated. The purpose of this event was not solely to prepare UFACE to counter CON members, but also to identify weaknesses in individual beliefs and repair those. Irrationality among the anti-Kondo community were not outcomes of a flawed objective, but a flawed environment or understanding. While direct references to politics, militarism, or other interests are detrimental, consistency does not disregard the similarities among members. The integration of various interests into the anti-Kondo community must serve to uplift the common purpose, either through ideological growth or impactful methodology. Given the current state of the anti-Kondo community, this process of transformation may take beyond 10 years. After all, it took 5 years for me to reach my current level of understanding, and even here I have room to grow in communication and explanation. The anti-Kondo community is often referred to as a movement, and a movement that seeks to honestly give back to the people must eliminate the delusions that attack the development of intellectual strength. Thus, if the anti-Kondo community wants to address the public, they must free them from the endless hunger for autonomy, for familiarity, for resignation to their inherent nature. And so, in attaching debating to UFACE, in intentionally exposing members to the ideology of the Kondo cult, my work continues to reinforce unity and enlightenment in their very interests, especially those revolving around a skill set significant to the modern age. I know that UFACE is declining from its prime, and I have seen it moving towards the same downfall the ODH faced. Yet, that does not stop me from facilitating the growth of both myself and UFACE members. Universal, uniform, unity. Uni illustrates the power of one. Change is dynamic. Intelligence imbued in compassion and reflectivity must be welcomed in the anti-Kondo community as a valuable spiritual embodiment. They have already been imbued with the deepest knowledge for the importance of our struggle against the Kondo cult. In contrast, to win over the fickle public, while passable as a means, must not be the end. If it were, the anti-Kondo group would be paralyzed in attempting to appeal to the apathetic. The goal is not to preach to the converted, but to prompt consistency and progression. This is the tactical attitude necessary for the anti-Kondo community. Over the past 10 years, many more people are aware of the Kondo cult, yet minimal progress has been made. Undoubtedly, something needs to change. This clear position must be expressed in education or encouragement material of the anti-Kondo community. If encouragement material is to become optimally effective, it must bear a key audience in mind and only be distributed to such. Otherwise, it will either be misunderstood or rejected as obvious. Even the literary or visual techniques vary between different audiences. Sentiment must be invoked among the public's reminders, while the anti-Kondo users must receive deeper understanding of their objectives. At most 1 in 1,000 speakers can speak to both the public and intellectuals simultaneously, with equal and extensive effect. Those speakers know the importance of an idea's form and the success of its presentation. Hence, in a dynamic environment, the best anti-Kondo users are those who adapt to their audience. Encouragement material serves not to entertain those who are already like-minded, but to communicate to anti-Kondo users, bystanders, and con members alike. This cannot be achieved by repeating the same characteristics of influence or power, as both are only as effective as others' faith in it. Just as encouragement material must change, so must my approach to UFACE. Unlike my time in the ODH, I had created, not just seized, every opportunity that presented itself to UFACE. Monthly division checks. The Media and Awareness Unit's weekly activity. Proposing and preparing the Innovation Division. The Anti-Kondo debating event. You might have noticed there was little mention of the other division leaders, and even less their own contributions to UFACE productivity. Not because I was omitting anything relevant, because there was nothing to omit in the first place. Any requirement proposed was rarely put into effect, and much of the other division's activities were either solely accomplished by the division leader or left untouched. UFACE cannot be considered successful if all the power and action is demonstrated by less than half of the division leaders. While I have learned from both the past and present, I cannot say the same for the other division leaders. Too many groups remain unclear of the importance of isolating personalization from collective objectives, especially one as universal as preserving intellectual strength. Members become unable to grow, restricted as executors of the leader's will and opinion, hence why the traditional establishment of a democratic system returned to strike at UFACE. Blind tradition still lurks within some division leaders, throwing off consistency and thus activity. Of course, it would be hypocritical and irresponsible to solely place the blame on others. I am also a division leader, hence I bear the same responsibility for allowing this to happen. While I was establishing a culture of productivity, a mind of inconsistency was lurking right under my nose. When attempting to obtain the necessary power to fix my mistake, my efforts proved fruitless in communicating to the UFACE members. I was supposed to be the division leader specifically specializing in communication. What does this say about my loss in the election? My inability to ensure the election never happened? My failure to motivate contribution outside of the Media and Awareness Division? While I had not repeated my mistakes with the ODH, entirely new ones presented themselves. I learned from my mistakes, but they were repeated by those that I had tried to warn. I succeeded in reinforcing consistency and productivity, but failed to mentor other division leaders in doing so. Needless to say, I had failed as the director of awareness. Fortunately, I never developed the reliance on status many other anti-Kondo leaders developed. I knew that if I were to continue leading with my current state, it would be detrimental for both my own growth and that of the other anti-Kondo users. The rest of UFACE must be given the opportunity to try their hand at growing and adapting, and it seems the only way to force this is my withdrawal as division leader. As the current representative of awareness, a user named Vogel will occupy my position, and he too will be expected to undergo the same leadership development I expect from everyone here. I remained in UFACE as a standard Media and Awareness Unit member, seeking to observe how the group changes. I'm expecting the division leaders to grow as leaders, regardless of whether UFACE thrives or not. If UFACE thrives in my absence, I will have accomplished one step of developing the anti-Kondo community in combining consistency and change. If UFACE falls like those before, it is time for me to return to my roots, just as I did after the ODH's decline. You cannot become someone better without sacrificing what you currently are. Welcome to my world. My contemplations have always been a hybrid of self-reflection and observation. The same contemplations can warrant unlimited potential if translated to action. In my time among Peace and UFACE, and my lessons from the ODH, I gradually developed the guiding principles that slipped from the anti-Kondo community's culture, particularly in reframing the psychology and beliefs of the Kondo cult. I realized that this is crucial, not just to give the anti-Kondo community structure and content, but to emphasize its relevance to the public. Again and again, the self-proclaimed critics have mocked and ridiculed the actions of anti-Kondo users, with varying accuracy. However, the universal relevance of my own discoveries has demonstrated the soundness of maintaining intellectual strength through combating the Kon members. Within my 5 years among the anti-Kondo community, I have seen dozens of groups rise and vanish without a trace. Even the ODH lasted for 3 years under my inexperience, yet it declined in the end. Today, there is U-Face, the group that, more than ever, harbored the fact that no matter what it combats, where it's paralyzed, how it is sabotaged, the ideas of human progress will always remain beneficial to the anti-Kondo community. I have poured everything I knew into U-Face. I had shared my discoveries, my achievements, my failures. If I were to do anything more, I would be strengthening myself and not the anti-Kondo community. Many selfish leaders forfeit their position at their group's low point. It takes foresight and conviction to pass on the power when the group's conviction is at its strongest, regardless of its current strength and numbers. Following my departure as a division leader, I sought to rediscover what a true director of awareness is capable of. While the other division leaders were expected to redevelop their own competencies as anti-Kondo leaders, I needed to earn the skill set associated with my former status, and in doing so hone my current abilities thricefold, perhaps even beyond that. From this day on, I returned to where I was after the ODH's downfall. Despite the familiarity of my position, the person who returned was far from the same adolescent who fell victim to the same mistakes as his peers. My past self exclusively pursued logic and psychology, utilizing these fields of knowledge alone. They failed to consolidate their objectives as a leader and an anti-Kondo user, leading to distractions and misdirected efforts. Now, my knowledge was not handpicked, it was forged. Every part of myself, from my hobbies and interests, to my history and education, have been integrated into the values of an anti-Kondo user. No distraction could hinder my progress, for I have learned that you can never lose intellectual strength if you embody it. Hence, my journey does not end here, and neither does the testimony of my life. During my conflict against the Kondo industry, the ODH member grew into its leader. The same leader has become a Peace co-founder. This Peace founder became U-Face Minister of Truth. The Minister of Truth changed into the first Director of Awareness. Now, the Director of Awareness title has been shed, revealing the witness. From the witness book, the following will not change. I dedicate my life to those who never knew mental strength. I dedicate my life to those who admire mental strength, but never seek to obtain it. I dedicate my life to those who are envied for their mental strength. Most of all, I dedicate my life to those who are willing to grow their mental strength, knowing they can always improve. A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one.